Welcome to Learning with Lowell. I'm Lowell, serial entrepreneur, startup advisor, and your host for the show. Every week we discover and speak with experts, scientists, leaders, and artists. Today we're joined with Jake Wintermute, developer evangelist at Ginkgo Bioworks. His mission is to grow biotech ecosystems to diversify the bioeconomy and to provide education, documentation, and support for developers bringing new projects to Ginkgo's platform. Please subscribe. It's quick, painless, and tells the Google gods this is a show with merit. Let's stay curious, learn about Jake and Ginkgo Bioworks on this episode of Learn with Lowell Show. So I thought it'd be fun to just hear a general update on how your cult Children of Meat is going.
It's going great. Thanks for asking. It's good. Yeah,
Yes.
we're it's everything that I've hoped for. The meat space has taken over the world. We're everywhere. You know, everywhere you go, people are made of meat, and
It's true.
that we call that success.
That's a factual statement. That all these things are not incorrect. The world is full of people who are full of meat, at least for the foreseeable future. I thought that was really. You gave a really great talk at New Harvest. I don't know if anyone listening it was tuning into it, but it's you can communicate a very authentic curiosity and interest to build something that can help out a lot of other people. There's this saying that the world is made better by people who grow trees whose shade they won't enjoy. Now, at the same time, you do get to tinker and play with what you're building too. But the idea behind, at least what I'm gathering for what you're working on, is really to get other people to start, living in the shade and building things and innovating with biotechnology.
Yeah, that's right. I love that about New Harvest. I think it's a really impressive community. So this is the cultured meat sort of industry meetup. It happens every year.
Not this year.
Oh well, pandemic.
I know, it's sad. It's a sad time. It's the
But
first time.
it's really interesting as a sort of gathering place. I think they're having a lot of success in shaping the culture of the cultivated meat industry. There's a lot of just mutual support, a lot of openness. It's a very values driven industry, and it didn't have to be that way, right? I think there's also there's a lot of money on the line, frankly, when it comes to cultivated meat, if that was going to be successful. And you could imagine a much more closed, a much more competitive industry. But the reality of a lot of people who want to work in that space and they want to solve that problem, they're not. They're very values driven. It's very values driven people, and I think it's important to keep that at the center of that industry. Yeah, because it's hard. Because it's a really hard game, right? And it's not going to be easy. And I think people who are working in that space, they need those values to sustain them.
Mm-hmm. Especially in the biotechnology space, I was listening to a person give an argument that a lot of the innovation in the last 15 years was because the patents ran out from the 70s and 80s of Gentech and stuff. So then people could start iterating on it. Granted, I don't think there was any basis from the 70s and 80s for CRISPR and stuff like that. So I don't think it entirely, that idea entirely encapsulates a lot of the innovation that's happened in the last 20 years. But it would be interesting to see to what percent is it just patents are now opening up and people can just go wild with new ideas again for.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I don't know the answer. Certainly IP still very important for the biotech industry. It's underlies a lot of business models. I often think about how IP played out in programming and in computer code, because there was a time when computer programs were very hard to write, very expensive to develop, had very specialized applications, and they were controlled by a kind of an IP. There was a really strong incentive in the early days to make sure that you had total control of all of the IP that was coming out of your computer code. And what happened in that industry was that it just got too easy. It just got too easy, too fast. People were writing too much code, too many different ways to solve problems. If you're gonna patent a for loop, and somebody will just write a loop with a different structure that solves exactly the same problem. And there just stopped being value in trying to protect specific designs in software. And instead, what happened in software was that the value came from doing it the fastest, doing it the best, and building a product that people actually wanted. And that became the differentiator in software, and the sort of holding the intellectual property around solving a problem in a particular way became much less important. So it seems to me inevitable that bio is eventually going to go the same way. There's no reason to believe, right? There's no reason to believe that a particular drug is always going to cost billions of dollars and decades in development time to produce. It is going to get faster, and it is going to get cheaper, and eventually it's going to be fast enough and cheap enough that it will stop making sense to build your moat around exclusively IP.
Yeah. How is your work right now helping to accelerate that future?
Yeah, that's a good question. So how do we get there? This is the question, right? How do we get to this future where biology is as easy as computer code, right? And I think it's important to sort of, as I get excited about the possibilities, right? I think it's important to reality check, right? Like we're not there. We're not there yet, right? Biology is still very hard tech. Development times are still pretty slow, very expensive. There's a lot of regulations, and with good reason, to make sure that we're doing things safely, and so on, right? So that just to establish the baseline. I don't want to make any crazy promises about biology turning into software tomorrow. But I do think that where I work at Ginkgo Bioworks, I do think that we see the path to make biology easier to engineer and to do it consistently, following a kind of a Moore's law scaling, right? I think that we've sort of locked in the feedback loops that we need to lock in order to turn biology into a discipline that gets easier every year and gets exponentially easier and cheaper every year, right? So I think that it's a big deal, right? You can't understate the power of these kind of feedback loops in developing technology, and I do think that we've got it at Ginkgo Bioworks. And how we've got it is, so first of all, it's scale. It's foundry scale and foundry integration. So that's classic economics, right? So if you do bioengineering, it's very expensive, but if you do more of it, then the unit costs go down per operation, right? Like that's the Industrial Revolution. Everybody knows that. It's been true for a really long time. But if you can build a foundry at scale, you can bring your unit costs down. In order to make that work, you need to serve many, many different customers, right? So you can't justify building a scaled up economical version of the foundry for just a couple of projects, right? You have to think about doing hundreds of biological projects in order to reach that scale, which brings down those unit costs. And so in Ginkgo, we do that by working with developers. So we think of ourselves, we're the organism company. We engineer the strains. We transfer those strains. We license those strains to our customers, and the customers are the ones who take those strains and use them to build products. Right. So this is an important innovation in the Ginkgo business model, where we don't have to be good at making all of the products because our customers do that. And so that enables this scale. It enables this feedback loop that makes biology easier to engineer. And then the
It
last part
sound.
of the
Oh,
formula.
go ahead.
Sorry, if I could just yeah. Wait, one more. Hold on. I'm so boxing. I'm so boxing about Ginkgo. The last part of the formula is the code base. We call it the code base.
Hmm.
So this is just the accumulated know-how and the data that comes from running a lot of these bioengineering projects. So it's kind of it's common sense. It seems kind of obvious that as you put in the reps in a particular technology, you get better at it. But a lot of biotech companies are built as kind of one-offs, right? They say, I'm going to build this platform, I'm going to create this one product, and then I'll shut it down because my product's done, and that's what my company does. So at Ginkgo, we accumulate this code base. We get better at the cell engineering with every new project that we do. And that's part of this flywheel that's going to make biology easier to engineer, and that's eventually it's going to get us to the world where biology is easy enough to engineer that it's something that can be a part of every economy, part of every country, something that can be solving problems everywhere in the world.
How is it just computational in terms of the code base and as you can tell by my podcast, Learning with Lowell, I like to learn. So I'm just curious, how do you build that reinforcement model? Is it just bioinformatics or is there machine learning in there? On a high level, I don't expect you to give me the algorithm.
On a high level, so yeah, it's a good question, right? It's an abstract concept, right? So what is a code base? It's accumulated biological data.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's accumulated process engineering know-how, right? So it's not really one thing, and it's not really one category of data, but it is everything you learn about what works in a particular type of bioengineering project and what doesn't work creates something that you can build on to reuse in a new project.
Yeah, is it like muscle memory? I'm just trying to like, if I was a startup and I was trying to replicate some type of feature like this to have my own type of platform, how would I go about doing it using yours as a reference? It seems very similar to Chat GTP, but like Chat GTP, lets people, I think, play with it a little bit more. But at the same time, people open source and try and figure out how they do that. I don't know if anyone's open source and tried like reverse engineering how Ginkgo Bioworks does their database portion of it, but I'm curious just like how they go about learning it. If you can't answer, that's fine. But I'm teaching myself machine learning, so like how things learn is like even more on my mind right now. Like how do you learn? Is it just the results? Is it like how you do the data as well? Like do the experiment and then the success of the experiment, and then you keep all that tracking, and then you learn off of that as well. Like what all types of things would you want to monitor?
Certainly that's part of it, right? Like that, like yes, right? Like that's one thing that you can do, right? Like that's absolutely right. Classic machine learning. That is something that you can apply in biology to solve a particular biological problem, right? So you can say, okay, I've got over here, I have a bunch of enzymes, right? And I have a bunch of different sequences for these enzymes, a bunch of different designs. That's input for a machine learning model. And then over here, I have performance data, right? So how well did those enzymes work? How were they stable? Did they express at a high level? Were they specific? Right. So everything that I want to know about performance. And you train that in a machine learning model, and it helps you make better enzymes. Right. Yeah. So that like totally happens in biology. So now that's within the context of one particular project.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is it all within the building of this type of platform? Is it all the experience and knowledge generated from what you do in-house and license out and get the results from it? Or is there anything like what ChatGPT, I always get the GPP part messed up. Is there any element of like learning off of what's published or publicly available as well?
Well, they're publicly available sequence repositories. Mm-hmm. Those are very valuable. Absolutely, right? You can go into GenBank, for example, and you find a lot of sequence data in there that you can use to to train an algorithm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so, as a tech evangelist, how do you fit into the ecosystem of Ginkgo Bioworks? Like,
Yeah, so I mean, I'm doing this, right? Like this is what I do. This is my job. So
okay, you get people excited.
I want to get people excited. Absolutely. I want to make Ginkgo's platform more approachable. I want to make it
Mm.
easier for developers. And so that means I do a lot of listening, talk to people who are in the very early stages of building out a biotech company, not sure exactly, what their tech stack is going to look like. A lot of them think, oh, maybe I want to create my own lab, right? I'm going to hire my own postdocs, get my own laboratory machines, and I'm going to build out my technology that way, right? That's the old model, right? That's the classic model. Still a very popular model for early stage biotech. Talk to them about what they want to do, and try to align Ginkgo's offering with the technologies that they're trying to develop, right? So the idea here is that now, instead of, if you're starting an early stage biotech company, instead of doing it yourself, doing it with your own hands, getting your own lab, instead you can develop on Ginkgo's platform, right? So you think about us as like as an operating system, right? Upon which your biological R&D project can run, right? You don't a good programmer, a very talented programmer, is capable of coding their own operating system. They can, but why would you? Why would you do it, right? In many cases, it's a solved problem, and sort of reinventing the wheel of putting in all of that infrastructure is not necessary. But to extend the sort of programming metaphor a little bit further, if you are going to build your app on top of an operating system, you benefit from a rich ecosystem of documentation for how that operating system works, right? So you've got the input and output functions. There's a Discord server where you can answer very technical questions about how to run apps on that operating system. You know how it performs. There are other people who have coded with it before. You can take classes. You can become a certified developer. Right? So there are all these things that tech platform companies do to make themselves easier to use for software developers. So the question is, what does that look like for bio, right? What is the sort of comparable suite of documentation and resources that a biological developer needs in order to make it very easy for them to use an existing platform like Ginkgo's, instead of going and trying to reinvent the wheel for their tech stack.
Makes sense. Do you have any this is more like a meta question, but I'm always curious, like, what allowed one group to be successful while other ones didn't? Ginkgo's been on my radar, and I've been keeping an eye on it for some time now. But there was definitely other people that tried doing what they were doing. As someone on the inside, what do you think? You get to see a lot more than anyone else gets to do. I think, from what I'm hearing, the focus on making it easy for people to develop, it's very much like an Apple type focus as well, which allows them to be successful. So it seems like one of those criterion that probably gave you guys an edge over maybe other people who were trying to build something similar. But what do you think, from an inside perspective, that allowed you guys to have the edge when other people, and probably even now, get funding and whatnot to do something similar?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think I have two answers. I have one that's maybe a little bit more fun, and one that's less fun, but is closer to the truth, right? Okay. So I think the fun answer, the clever answer, in my opinion, is that it was a really good idea for Ginkgo to become the organism company and to focus on the organism as the product, and not be the product company, not try to take all of those organisms and carry them downstream and use them to develop all of the possible products that you can make with biology. I think that was a really good idea, to focus on the organism as the product. And the reason is because biology is really big. There's so much that biology can do that it's really not possible for one company to get good on the product side at bringing all of those different products to market, right? So if you're gonna bring a pharmaceutical to market, and you're gonna bring an agricultural strain to market, and you're gonna bring a food flavoring to market, and it's they're just completely different markets, right? They're completely different industries, and so being good at all of those things, it's impossible for any one company. There's a temptation to want to own the full stack, right? To want to be like, oh wow, biology, I can do this. Here's this really cool thing with biology. I want to do all of it. I want to capture all of the value. I'm gonna make a biofuel, and then I'm also gonna process the biofuel, and I'm also gonna sell the biofuel. I'm gonna develop a cell therapy, right? And I'm gonna take that cell therapy, all the way through clinical trials. And conventionally that's how biology has always worked, right? You've sort of focused your tech around one vertical, and the idea was that you carry that product as far as you can, in order to capture the most value. So that's what Ginkgo, I think, is very smart about that, right? So we can actually be good at all of the synthetic biology, at all of the cell engineering. We can be good at all of it, and there's a lot of internal synergy. So when you get good at one kind of cell engineering, that carries over to being good at lots of other different kinds of cell engineering, even kinds that have totally different applications in the real world. Right? So that works. Specializing as the organism company works, trying to do all the products, that doesn't work. That's a fun answer.
Yes.
Boring answer is, it's just execution, right? It's just execution. It's just tech is just really, really hard, and you just have to get a million things right and work your ass off all the time. And there's just no way around it, right? It's just
makes sense.
Not a fun story, right? But a lot of hard work by a lot of people over a long time.
Was there a point of execution that you thought was quite ingenious?
Oh, I see it all the time. I see ingenious execution happening all the time. That's why I love my job. I love being close to the technology, and just being able to see just all of the really cool stuff that's happening. I absolutely love it. Now, a lot of times I can't talk about it, right?
Yeah, that's not fun.
A lot of times I can't talk about it, and that's not fun. But that's also there. I think it's something that I think about, right? It's something that I think about in this job, because on the one hand, like, you can't talk about everything. Like we're working in biotech, right? Like, customers, they come onto the platform. Their IP is very valuable to them. They're entitled to privacy and so on. Also, we have IP. That's an important part of our business model. And that's all true. On the other hand, if you're a platform company, people have to know what you can do, right? People have, in order to use you effectively, right? So there's a certain amount of communication that is, you just can't escape it, right? So I think that's an interesting tension that we're working through, and I'm hoping to get to a place where we can really have a sort of a sandbox, right, or a space for developers where people can sort of ideate freely and not worry too much about the sort of IP restrictions and the proprietary data that is still a very important part of the biotech ecosystem.
Yeah, how would that even work? Because I wonder the same thing all the time. Like, how do you have it? There's a what is it called? It's not GitLab. Is it GitLab? There's a tech startup. There's a tech business. It's not a startup. It's like $1 billion company. I think it stopped being a startup at that point. They have it's all open source, and then they monetize like premium features. So like if you just want to come in and like plug in and not pay anything, like manage it, like self-host it essentially, you can just run off and do that. But if you want like more premium services that they have the expertise in doing it, then you can work with them to do it. I don't know how that would work in the biotech space. I don't know if anyone's doing something like that.
Yeah, it's a hard question, and I don't know. Some things that I think about though are maybe there's like a front end and back end distinction that is relevant here. So think about like a microprocessor, right? Think about it. Think about a computer chip. That is extremely expensive to make, to design and create piece of tech. It is for a very broad market of developers, and they all need to know everything about how to use it, right? If you want to sell computer chips, you need a very rich documentation on, you could say, on the front end, right? If you like, about how to use a computer chip. Right? What are the input and output features of a computer chip? You don't have to tell people how to make a computer chip factory.
Yeah.
The design, the architecture of the computer chip factory, that can stay secret, right? You don't have to tell people what your factory looks like in order for people to use the chips effectively. And so we're not used to that in biology, right? We don't tend to make that sort of input and output distinction in biology. But but you see it everywhere in tech, right? Like there's everything in software, everything in hardware. There's the documentation for how to use it is completely different from the documentation on how it's made. And it works beautifully in tech, right? And so if maybe there's an analogy to that in biology, where you can have a service with total clarity, total transparency about how to use the service, what it can do, while still keeping the back end proprietary.
That makes a lot of sense. So you work with a lot of different biotech teams essentially that are going to be using your platform, Ginkgo Bioworks platform, to build their products. Is there a product that you haven't seen that you've been waiting for someone to come up with? Like I know I watched a talk where you were talking about how you're really excited about antibiotics, but I don't know. I'm sure you maybe get antibiotic people in there, but is there something that you haven't seen yet that would be like, oh, that'd be neat. I'm waiting for this. Anyone step up?
Oh man, of course, yeah, all the time. Biology is so big. It's funny that it's like we have so many programs running now that I don't even I don't know them all, right? I don't know them all, and I could be like, I posted on the internal Slack the other day. I was like, oh hey, here's a neat idea. Maybe we should, and sure enough, they're like, yeah, we're already doing that, right? Like it's already happening. So that's a funny thing, but yeah, but absolutely it happens all the time. I mean, in a big picture, right? Or like a long-term thinking, I would love to see more synthetic biology in plants, for example. That's not something that we do a lot of.
Farming? Like molecular farming or something more just broad, like kind of like using.
I want to engineer actual plants, right? I want to engineer trees, right? Like I want to engineer.
You want to make Avatar.
I want
make
Avatar.
The Avatar world. Yeah.
I want to make Avatar world. That's what I want. Yeah. Somebody bring me Avatar world as a project, and I'm into it. I know. I think that. Yeah, I don't know. I think that sounds fun. I like new organisms. I like non-traditional organisms. I like sort of non-traditional model systems. I think cultured wood is really fun. So the idea that you could grow plant cells in culture and then turn them into free form wooden objects. I think that's a really inspiring concept, and I think in general, I'm interested in sort of moving biology away from traditional organisms and traditional model systems into the sort of real world, if you like, right? Like there's so much biology out there where you wish you could be like, oh, like here's a real like this is a here's a berry, right? Oh, here's a wild berry, but it's poisonous. Let me just knock out some of those genes that make the poison, and now I have a real berry, right? And like that's such an easy concept, except the fact that nobody knows how to work with this particular plant or this particular organism, right? So I think uh, that's like something that inspires me is thinking about sort of like just like next gen projects. But like honestly, for now, like there's still a lot of work to do in like the relatively easy tech of growing microbes in culture to make bioproducts.
Yeah, I remember from one of your talks that you said E. coli was your favorite, but it sounds like you're moving away from that, or at the very least excited about building or working with some other things. I haven't heard too much about using plants in that way outside of like molecular farming, where they use it. They like engineer the plant to, and this is like if there's like engineering like corn to be bigger corn. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking like using it. I assume something like yeast or E. coli, where you can engineer the plant organism to do like some type of function or to build some type of molecule. If that's how you're thinking
Yeah,
about it.
yeah, that's right. That's sort of that's where the industry is today, right? Like
Yeah,
that's right, and which is like that's hard enough, right? Like it's not,
yeah.
but yeah, absolutely, right. So the idea of focusing on a particular protein, a particular enzyme, a particular molecule, um, maybe doing some metabolic engineering on a strain, on a live strain, so that it maybe it has a beneficial effect on the microbiome.
Hmm.
Um, that's the sort of that's like the scope of projects that are ready to go today.
Yeah. This may be a dumb question, and I just don't. I've not read about it at all. How would you make plants do what yeast and E. coli can do? Because I think one of the benefits of E. coli, for instance, is just like everything's been ripped out, but its ability to do what we want. It's very like used system, and we've like brought it as small as possible to do what we want it to do, depending on what you're doing. How would you do that with plants?
Mm. I think people sometimes refer to that as domestication.
Yeah.
It's the process of taking a microbe that hasn't really been used very much in the lab, and finding the right conditions to make it work in the lab, or evolving it or genetically modifying it to make it easier to use in the lab.
Hmm.
In the case of plants, I mean, so you could either focus on cell culture techniques. So a lot of plants can be propagated in cell culture. So you can take a cutting and from that isolate some cells and then grow those cells in a test tube, just like you would an E. coli or a yeast, for example. Um, and genetically modify them or study them in a test tube, and then go back to cultivate a full live plant from those cells. So some plants are amenable to that kind of handling. Um, in others, there's no easy way. Uh, to do it, right? So I think
Mhm.
there's like, if you wanted to think about like what does that world look like, you know, where we're doing sort of, we're doing a lot of engineering work in plants. I don't know, right? Maybe there's like, maybe we need like robotic systems
Mhm.
for cultivating like actual plants, right? And that's much harder to imagine. Like, you need a much more sophisticated robotics to grow, you know, a plant that is big and has a lot of 3D structure versus, you know, a test tube that you can just kind of squirt and move around. Um, but I don't know. It's cool. It's cool to think about, right? That what
Yeah.
is there a plant foundry
Yeah.
in the future?
Yeah. Something that'd make itself amenable to engineering. So it sounds like it's the protocol itself. Well, finding the right organism that could be domesticated, and then developing a protocol that allows it to have the highest success rate for people to engineer upon it is like what we need to do to have that be equivalent to like yeast or E. coli.
Yeah, that's right. And that's something that I think about. I think there's a real, like, there's like a product focus thinking
Hmm.
that I think is really useful when you're looking at a new microbe, right? So it's sort of it's there's the questions that a typical scientist would ask, right? Which are things like, can I grow it in a test tube? Is it safe? Is it easy to genetically engineer? You know, is it easy? Do I understand it well? Is there a lot of data on it? Right. So like all of those scientific considerations. But then there's also product focused considerations, which are, uh, what does this do something that nothing else can do and that people want? And is it sort of versatile enough that I can offer that to 100 developers,
Hmm.
right? And that's the sort of like the like a Ginkgo perspective on an organism like that, is that it's really right. It's like it's not enough that it's just amenable to use, and it's even not I mean, maybe it's enough that it does something really really cool that nothing else can do, but then does it do 100 different things that are really cool that nothing else can do?
Hmm.
And like that's a good platform organism, right? That's a good foundry organism.
That makes sense. Is is it is it possible to have like turtles all the way down where someone uses uh like Ginkgo Bioworks as a turtle, and then on the top of that turtle, they have their own platform technology that they're building, and then someone has a platform technology that they build off of that platform tech. How many turtles do you think of platform technology could you make, starting with Ginkgo Bioworks at the center or at the bottom, before
Hmm.
it's just like
A
straight building
platform
products
on
off of
top of
it?
a platform.
Yeah.
Hmm. Mm, I don't know. I don't know. That's an interesting question.
It's like
I don't have
Discord.
a good sense of it. So I guess one thing that I would say is that I think it's important, um, when you're structuring R&D for biology, um, you have to be humble, uh, about how biological R&D is very very hard to do, and that really constrains your options when you want to organize it effectively. So, and which is to say that like laboratories have existed for a really long time, and they exist for a reason. And the reason is that they allow sort of human experts to centralize and coordinate a lot of really complicated functions that are very difficult to sort of modularize, uh, and separate. So in that sense, there's a lot about biology is different from software, where like a you know, you can split up code farm it out to 100 different servers. They'll all execute it independently, and then bring all of those functions back together, and reintegrate them centrally, and computer code will do that for you, right? So you can, which gives you a lot of flexibility in how you design your code, right? Like you can centralize it, you can distribute it, you can build it up in layers. In biology, there's often a lot less flexibility in that sense. So, which is to say that, like, the foundry works as well as it does because we're able to centralize and integrate a lot of really complex processes that they just need to be centralized and integrated. And if you wanted to, you couldn't split them up and send them to 100 different mini foundries. It just wouldn't work. Biology just doesn't let you do that, right? And so, in that sense, it's useful to think about a sort of a front end and a back end distinction. I think that the organism is the product is the right way to think about it. And so, like, if there were a foundry that was going to be or if there were a platform that was built on top of Ginkgo, the organism is the channel, right? Or is the point of contact between what Ginkgo does and what Ginkgo's users do. The organism is the sort of right point of contact, and sort of other biological things that you could imagine doing, using the foundry are best sort of left inside the foundry, because they just have to be built in a certain way to work well.
So it sounds like there's one turtle, like one main turtle, and it's the organism that is basically how big the shell can be in terms of what
it's one turtle. Yeah, that's right. We want it so that what you want is you want a really big turtle that lots of people can ride on.
Yeah. So I was talking to someone the other day, and they're talking about how there's a bunch of different ingredient companies that are doing B2B essentially in the cell ag space. And so you have like one for this type of protein, this one for this type of protein, one for this type of protein. It's like, well, what if you just had like Ginkgo Bioworks, give you an organism and then, feed it, have it create different types of protein in one giant foundry place. And so then that'd be two turtles, because then you could just output the proteins to different people who would then use those to make products and like Tyson's chicken and stuff like that. So I think you can get one more turtle possible.
I see what you're getting at. I see what you're getting at, and I like it. And I think that is right. And this is an interesting part of my job. So how I would sort of rephrase that, and I would say that it's because Ginkgo exists, biotech companies should be structured differently. They should be built differently in the early stages. They should have different technology deliverables that they prioritize in order to take advantage of the fact that Ginkgo's foundry lets you multiplex efficiently, right? And I think a protein space is a really good example of that. Whereas, once upon a time, if you made a bioproduct company and your bioproduct was a protein, that was it. You focused on that one protein, right? And that made sense to focus on one protein because it was really hard, it was really expensive, took a really long time. You had to do it really well. But because Ginkgo exists, you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to constrain yourself to thinking about one protein. Maybe it's better to think about 50 similar proteins, right? Engineer cell lines to make all of them, right? Now, some of them aren't going to work well. That's biology. But some of them are going to work really well, right? And because of the economics of scale, because of the economics of integration, testing all of them is just going to be more efficient. It's going to be a more efficient use of R&D time and money than having 50 different companies, each one chasing one individual target. Right. Yeah. So this is, I think it's a really good example of of a sort of a Ginkgo powered company. And now if you were going to build that company, it's also important to keep in mind that you want to be good at turning all of those proteins into products, right? So you wouldn't just pick 50 random proteins, right? You would pick 50 proteins that had, similar applications or a similar market, or that you thought that you could build a company that would be really good at getting all of those proteins to a customer who wanted them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been wondering when there's going to be like consolidation, because there's so much specialization going on, and it sounds like people aren't really making use of Ginkgo Bioworks in the cell ag space then, or I don't know, maybe they have other factors that are limiting them. But I've been wondering, when is there going to be some type of consolidation, so we have like a McDonald's where instead of just getting like a burger, you can get like a whole cell ag suite of, cell ag potato fries, cell ag soda. You can do cell ag coffee. I don't see, like, you could just go into a place and you could have like a little small microbrewery behind the glass, like kind of like Subway, so you can see your food being made. Like, not all of it, of course, but like just a little sample. I've been wondering, like, who's going to bring that all together? Because right now it's just like, oh, I'm gonna have this protein, I'm gonna fill that need. I'm gonna have this protein, I'm gonna fill that need. I've been wondering, like, how's the consolidation going to work? And then can people do like this turtle thing that we're talking about, which may for the listener sound a little eccentric, but exciting times. I think, I don't know, I haven't seen anyone really move in that direction. I keep suggesting people do stuff like that, as well as build in the Midwest. It's so much cheaper out here. Ginkgo Bioworks could be 12 times the size. But at the same time, I don't think costs are a constraint in the Boston area. I think you get all the talent and stuff.
I think so. Like, what you're talking about is, I think it's going to be a big part of the bioeconomy.
Yeah.
Right. But it's going to be a big part of the bioeconomy on the product side. Right. So the Midwest, absolutely. Right. Like anywhere there's farming, anywhere there's agriculture, anywhere there's biology, there's going to be bioproducts. So there definitely should be bioproducts companies, and they should be based in the Midwest, and they should take advantage of all the competitive advantages that the Midwest has in the bioproduct space, right? So it's like, get your, I don't know, whatever, your agricultural byproducts, or your dairy waste streams, or whatever people in the Midwest know better than I do, right? Like, that's kind of the point, right? But I know that there's a lot of opportunities there, and absolutely the bioeconomy should be located there, right? And so, what that's going to look like? There'll be a Midwest based developer that can recognize those opportunities. They say, right, so they know a particular product really well, right? So they say, I know here's something that the dairy industry needs, right? Or here's something that the ag industry needs, or here's something that I don't know, what Midwesterners like, so ranch dressing, right? I have a really good ranch dressing recipe.
How dare you?
That is going to sell in the
True.
Midwest, right? I'm going to bioproduce ranch dressing, and only it has to be done in the Midwest because only I know my customers. Huge opportunities. So all of those can exist, right? And so what they're going to use Ginkgo's platform, right? So they're going to come to Ginkgo, and they're going to say, Ginkgo, I need this. I need an organism that makes me ranch dressing, that makes me that turns agricultural or dairy waste into a cosmetic. I need an organism that replenishes the soil in a particular type of farming operation, right? Or whatever it is. And Ginkgo is going to be the organism company that provides the enabling biotech, but it's going to be the Midwesterners who end up making those products, and they're going to capture most of the value from those organisms, right? Because that's where that's on the product side. That's where you need this sort of distributed bioeconomy where everybody can be building to the strengths of their particular region and their particular industry.
Yeah, I think the chip metaphor is really apt, given how like everyone's trying to reshore and do stuff like that to counteract Taiwan and China. Given like there's one corporation in Holland that makes can make the like a specific machine that you need to make chips, and so then people buy from them. But then the software to make the chips is from America, and then putting it together is really like 60% in Taiwan. And so, granted, like that's a very limited because it's just chips. Like we're talking like so much more complex in terms of like the different things you can do. Though chips are extremely complex as well. Anyone who's doing chips out there, I don't mean to despair you, but it's also a unique opportunity nowadays with that because we're coming back to America in terms of those types of things. I love to learn. I'm curious, what are you learning right now? It could be work related, could not be work related. I just want to like pick your head in terms of what are you learning about?
What am I learning about? Oh man,
I don't even know if that's grammatically correct. What are you currently learning?
what am I currently learning about? Let's see. I am. I get. So like big picture is I'm learning a lot about business and about marketing. I'm a scientist by training. I came into this job not a lot of industry experience, and that's like been the steepest learning curve for me
Yeah.
is the sort of like as a scientist, right? You really center the tech, right? And you think that it's like, okay, I'm going to invent this really perfect piece of tech, and then that's it. I've got it. Right now I'm rich, right? I'll just give it whatever. I don't know. I'll sell it to some company or whatever, and they'll turn it right. Turns out, right, and especially in biology, the business side, the product side, really, really hard, extremely hard, a lot of hard work. Very requires a lot of planning and focus, right? It's not there's sort of nothing automatic about how a piece of biology gets turned into something that people actually want. And so I'm learning a lot about how that part of the process works these days.
Is there a specific aspect of marketing or sales that you're currently having troubles with, or that you're currently chewing through? I can basically give recommendations,
You
or
want to give me
someone listening can help,
recommendations,
or someone listening could help. Maybe more
or
qualified.
someone interesting can help? I'm interested in in sort of high tech marketing. I'm interested in uh, making concepts accessible to people who are very smart. I'm interested in sort of how to convince people who are very smart and very good at what they do that that I have something to offer them, right? There's actually another way to approach their problem that maybe wasn't available in the past, and to sort of do that without belittling them, right,
Yeah.
or disrespecting their intelligence, right? Because I think that sort of happens a lot, right? It's like what we're offering is it's a big deal, right? Like it's a pretty disruptive reality. Um, the truth is that a lot of the old way of doing biotech R&D is obsolete, or it's going obsolete really fast. And I want to make sure that I sort of get that message to people who need to hear it, but in a way that is sort of empowering to them, right? And makes it clear that there's a real opportunity here to do biotech in a new way, that is going to be a sort of a new tool in your R&D arsenal, and not something that means like, you're not as good at genetic engineering as I am.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds similar to some people in the Midwest and their thoughts on autonomous cars. It's like, why do I need an autonomous car? I drive so well. But I think there's the elements of doing that. In well, actually, a quick question is, and do you see yourself using the knowledge and like let's say I was a customer, like we're talking this way in terms of point of friction, or is it like making content so they can like documentation so that they can understand it themselves? Like, are you looking to learn so you can make better written content, or is it so when you have these business meetings, you can better understand what they need and like potentially facilitate that need with Ginkgo Bioworks?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So like normally the way this business is done is face-to-face meetings, right? Like
Oh, sweet. I have a book for you then.
that's how it happens. It's a lot of that. And so we have really good business development people who can take those meetings, and technical business development people, right? And that's a lot of work. Now I'd like to make that easier.
Yeah.
I'd like to make that faster, right? It's
Mhm.
it's a very
Like the pipeline.
uh, yeah, right. It's a very high touch, right? A very
Mhm.
human expertise focused process. And I think we can simplify it. I think we can make it happen faster with these other resources, with documentation, with content, that is going to that sort of simplifies how we communicate our offering, so that it doesn't have to be done in many hours of face-to-face business meetings. So I think that's a possibility. I also think that I think that there's something sort of magical about technical documentation. I think that if you do it right, then it's like not only do you describe what you can do, what your platform is capable of, but you empower the people who read that documentation to use it in surprising ways, right? So I think that's the enabling layer, right? And so if you like to go back to like the chip documentation, for example, right, or like an operating system documentation, the people who build it, they don't know all of the applications that are going to come out
Yeah.
of that software, and like 99% of the value that is created from those tech platforms is created by developers doing things that the platform engineers never thought about, never thought was possible.
Yeah, I understand. I follow you. The
Yeah, and so like that's like that that's there that's like that's exciting, right? Like that's a
yeah.
real it's a whole nother layer of like of creating value.
Yeah, I think a book you would enjoy is Never Split the Difference. Every scientist I recommend it to says it changed their life. I don't know if I'm allowed to reference the individual examples, but it helps a lot, is what I'll say. And if you read it and you hate it, I'll give you money back. Like I'll literally, I think you'll like it. A lot of the
Okay.
stuff that you've been talking, like how you speak and how you formulate your questions now, you're like, you got the foundation there. I think it'll just give you like the extra edge to like get the most out of those meetings. I don't know how you guys do onboarding new people, but one thing that I've always liked to do, I have like documentation when I onboard people, so they can just like read in 10 minutes what some people would spend a day to explain something to someone. And so one thing that I have them do when they're through the process, they understand the component or whatever they're going to be working on, is I have them rewrite the documentation. Like, was there anything that was not clear or whatever? So everyone who comes in is like refining the documentation and making it even more clear as everything goes on. I don't think Ginkgo Bioworks does that,
Mm.
but additionally or alternatively, I think that if you just like let a bunch of like college kids at it with like Igem and said like, hey, you get like a free pilot thing, whatever, to make your Igem competition protein, and then you have them read it, and then just let them be. If they have questions, they'll hoard you with the questions. Then you can refine the documentation based off their questions. So like you're crowdsourcing the pain points of confusion.
Yes. Absolutely, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the dream, right?
Yeah.
That's the dream. Like for every tech company, the idea of community crowdsourced, self documentation, right? Like that's an engine, right? Like that's a really that's how you've made it,
Yeah.
as a platform technology, when you have a community of people who are not only like improving your documentation and actively telling you what they want from you, but also training each other. Uh, Absolutely, right? Like
Yeah.
huge win. Dream scenario for me
Yeah.
and my job is to build a community like that.
Yeah. It sounds like iGEM and stuff like that would be an easy, take the documentation, hand it to them, and just see how they get confused. But I don't know. Those are just my thoughts. Never split the difference. Check it out. Let me know. Anyone listening in, if you have ideas on how to help,
Sure, man.
throw them your way as well. What are some books you recommend people check out? It doesn't have to be related to this stuff. It could be whatever you think people would enjoy reading. Basically, this Saturday, the way I think about it, you can subject anyone to some books to read, and they must read them.
Okay.
I do.
Books to read out here. Let me. I'm gonna wheel myself back to my bookshelf here. I'll grab a couple of examples. Where is it?
For people watching, there is a. I mean, for people listening, there's a behind him. There's like the Ginkgo Bioworks blue and a bookshelf, and so he's literally grabbing books just for people listening in, so you can get like a play-by-play. The room, there's a red couch, and there's some really nice art pieces on the wall.
That's David Goodsell. That one. That's the one that looks like a cell. I'm a big fan. All right, so here's a couple that I just pulled from my shelf. This is A Feeling for the Organism. This is a biography of Barbara McClintock by Evelyn Fox Keller. Barbara McClintock, biologist responsible for discovering jumping genes, transposons. So these are pieces of DNA that have the ability to cut themselves out of a genome and move themselves around, and they're very important in biology. They were discovered in the context of corn and these sort of multicolored corn, where you've seen these in the Midwest. I don't know, where you have corn there and each kernel is a different color.
They're tasty.
This is transposons, and so she was a real pioneer in sort of holistic or sort of non-reductionist science, and that's I think an important thesis of this, A Feeling for the Organism. She refused to oversimplify the problems that she was facing, even though that meant that for a long time she wasn't able to give satisfying explanations to the scientists around her, who were sort of thought only reductionist thinking was good enough to count as science, and of course also didn't respect her because she was a woman, of course, right?
Sounds like a great book.
But it worked out, right? It was she found a new language, a new level of complexity in biology, and we ended up getting the Nobel Prize for that discovery. And then another one I have just on my shelf. This is Grow Magazine. Love this. This is published by Ginkgo. You can get these for free if you go to growbyginkgo.com. This one is the Futures issue.
Oh, swank! I love free things.
They're beautifully published. So these are like, how can I say it? They're speculative. They're meant to be inspirational. There's just different pieces of writing, philosophy, people thinking about the future, people thinking about the meaning of science. It's really, it's pure inspiration, right? It's not marketing, right? Or if it's marketing, it's marketing because it's awesome, and then hopefully people will read it and they'll think that Ginkgo is awesome too.
Yeah, it sounds like the Synthago has a newsletter for their genetic engineering. It sounds like that, but in paper format, which I like Synthago's newsletters because they like show you how to do stuff, and it sounds kind of like that in terms of inspiring you to build things. All right, so I know we're coming to the end, so I want to here's some personal questions. Where do you think you'll go when you die?
Oh shit!
Yeah, that's a transition. I was like, oh god, should I lead with the other question first?
I'm not gonna die. You kidding me? I'm not gonna die. I reject the premise. I reject the premise.
You reject the hoe. You reject the.
I'm just
the null.
My plan is to just not die.
Okay, so but I'm saying tomorrow you get hit by a car. Where do you think you'd go? Do you think there's something you go to, or is it just fade to black? I'm not threatening you.
That can happen. You can just get hit by cars. Oh yes. No. Oh, I wasn't planning on that at all. Oh no. Oh, this is terrible. I don't know. I guess I don't know. I don't know what happens. And I guess I'm happy. I'm comfortable not knowing, relatively comfortable.
You don't have any like existential dread or wonder about it?
Oh,
It's kind
tons
of
of
like before.
existential dread. I have lots of
Okay.
existential dread. Absolutely, absolutely. But I love my existential dread. You know, I welcome it. It's I'm okay with having that be part of the fun.
So if there's two doors in front of you. One, you get to understand something. The other one, you don't have to understand it, and things will just continue on. Sounds like you'll go with the as long as things work out, you're fine not understanding.
I don't think I don't like that. I don't like that metaphor for the situation because
That's
there
fair.
aren't two doors and there
Yes.
can't be two doors, right? The part of what makes the sort of unknowable questions inspire so much wonder is that they is that they're unknowable, and that the option
Hmm.
of knowing them is not there, right? There's that other door uh, can never exist, and so I don't know. So I think I like um, damn, I don't know. You're blowing my mind here. I'll sit with that. I'll have to sit with that.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, like, okay, how would we test if there's an afterlife? Well, we could like shock paddle you and like you die and then bring you back. But I don't. I
Like
think that seems very. Yeah. Like, there's a
oh
movie
man,
about
like what
this.
was it? Like the
It's a
Kiefer
horror
Sutherland
movie.
movie from the '80s, the Flatliners.
Yeah. There's a new one. They redid it. It's like a horror movie.
They brought it back. Awesome,
Yeah. All right. I
awesome.
think
Sign me up.
you'll enjoy the yeah you'll enjoy the other questions. So there's a murder that happens, and three people did the murder. They did other things besides murder, but I don't want to go there. And
Okay.
but when the cops showed up, they grabbed four people. One guy just happened to be walking by. He didn't do it, but three people are guilty of the four. You're the judge, and you have to decide on the sentence for all of them, and you can't individualize the sentence. And it's only the information that I just gave you. But like God has whispered in your ear and said, three are guilty, one is not. The punishment for this crime at the time is you hang everyone for murder. Like if you commit murder, you get hung, I guess is the term. What crime do you what sentence do you give the four people, knowing that you have to give it universally?
That's that's a fun question. I think that I have an answer to that question, but I don't. How much time do I have?
I mean, I don't have a blocker. My wife will come home and yell at me
You don't
eventually.
have a blocker? Okay. So that I've actually been thinking about that kind
Mm,
of moral question recently, because it connects to another idea that is interesting to me, which is this idea of reductionism in science,
mm,
which is what I mentioned in this sort of feeling of the organism book. So there's a critique of that kind of moral reasoning that is called the ethics of care. The ethics of care. And if you can, I guess I don't have time to. I guess it'll disrupt the flow if I Google it. But the ethics. It's developed by um, philosophers, and I'll sort of paraphrase it as best I can. Maybe getting it wrong, but the the idea here is that sort of once upon a time, there were moral philosophers who tried to create an, an ethical philosophy that was reductionist, that was built up from simple ethical principles. And they thought that that was the sort of the best thing that you could do in ethics was to articulate ethical principles and then live your life according to those precise ethical principles, like it was a mathematics, right?
hmm
Like it, right? So in this case, right, they would say, okay, well, three three versions of three times justice is better or worse than one injustice, and right, and so I'll have some ethical principle that I will follow that will tell me what's right or not in this situation. Ethics of care takes a different approach and says, well, actually, this is life is not a math problem, and not only is life not a math problem, Life is never a math problem, and it can never be a math problem. And so therefore, attempting to describe perfect and clear ethical principles for living life is a fool's errand. It can never happen. Actual ethical decisions are always made in the real world. And in the real world, there are always infinite specific parameters, right? So there's context. There's always a very rich context of possibilities that are going to influence the outcome of any particular question. So in the real world, there would always be things that we could ask, like, like, who are these people? Were there mitigating circumstances for the crime? Was the trial fair? Is the information accurate? Why can't we just change the law so that we don't have to convict 3 of them? And in the real world, all of those possibilities exist. And so because ethical decisions are always made in the real world, we don't have to have a reductionist ethics. So that's my non-answer.
That's a logic leading up to your answer, but you still have to give an answer. You like, for instance, you don't have to. I'm saying, like, you have to give one sentence, right? And the typical sentence for murder is you get hung, but you can give them whatever sentence you feel is appropriate. You can set them all free if you want.
But this is the beauty of it, is that I don't have to give an answer because it's not real.
You don't want to play and answer the question? What you would do?
I don't have to play. Ethics is not a game, right? Ethics is what happens in the real world.
So you wouldn't you just would leave them there standing? A murder, not justice? You just walk away from your job?
They don't exist, right? They're not.
They do exist.
Where do they exist? Point at them.
In the example.
They exist in an example?
Yes.
That doesn't sound like the real world to me.
Yeah, I mean, how do you learn if not from abstract concepts?
How do you learn if not from the real world?
Yeah, but I mean, you can have the real world, but you also can just, it's like a thought experiment. But
it's a thought experiment. It's true, but I respond to a thought experiment with a sort of rival thought experiment. And the sort of I think it's an interesting critique of the way that we think about ethics. But okay, I'll answer your question. I'll play again. I would. If I only knew 3 out of 4 of them were guilty,
yep,
I would let them go.
It's interesting.
I would let them go. Yes, I would. Unless the crime was, like, really, really bad.
When they murdered someone. If someone you loved was
yeah,
murdered,
but there's murder and then there's murder. You know what I'm saying?
It's first degree murder regardless. That gets you hung. But
if I would, right, I guess it would depend on how it would depend on how scared that I was that they would hurt someone else if I let them go. That's probably what would affect my decision the most.
Okay, that's an interesting answer. I know we talked about a variety of topics today. With the remaining time, do you have any advice for people who want to get into synthetic biology or biotechnology as a career?
I think the simple advice is that you do it by doing it, right? You just the way that you get into something is by doing it. So you sort of involve yourself in any kind of biological research or synthetic biology work that you can find.
Sweet. And like Igem or anything? Is there any spot?
Igem's a great choice. Igem's a great choice. It's very accessible. There's Igem teams in a lot of places. Definitely recommend Igem.
Thank you for joining us today with the Learn with Lowell show. Check us out at learnwithlowell.com. Anywhere podcasts can be found, subscribe. Tell me what you thought of this episode. Check us out on YouTube in particular. That's a new thing I'm doing. Timestamps and links are in the show notes. Thank you for coming, and I hope every one of you found something today that you're curious about to learn more about, and you'll go out and be curious and learn something new. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.